While everyone is convinced the big money is suppressing Bitcoin's price, the opposite is quietly happening. They're going all in. Bitcoin ETFs just saw record inflows to start the year and are on track to beat last year's $22 billion. And now we have the $1.7 trillion giant Morgan Stanley officially rolling out, or rather filing to roll out a spot Bitcoin ETF. Though this ETF is a little different than all the other ones we've seen. The big theme takeaway is Wall Street is here and they're coming for your Bitcoin in 2026. So buckle up, guys. It's going to be an interesting year, like I was saying yesterday. Anyways, I am not alone today. I do have our boy Kent Halliburton from Saz Mining. Oops, wrong one. Yeah, as you guys know, Nico, Sophie's about to have a child, so it might be you guys got some bullishness with me all week because Nico's going to be out. Anyways, let's start with the first point. This is obviously kind of an interesting trend. I have been saying, look, since the institutions are here, one of the avenues, one of the indicators, if you can call that we should be watching is the ETF inflows. And we've started 2026 with a bang. So the first point here is the Bitcoin ETFs have brought in $197 million of Bitcoin yesterday alone, the largest single day inflow since October. And remember what happened in October? October 10th is when we got that really big drop down, the big decline where everyone was freaking out. We all were kind of on the fence of whether we were in a bear market or not. Well, today the price, is hitting this 94K range, but it looks like those people that are buying through the ETFs are starting to feel extremely bullish, which really goes into the larger trend of there's not that much Bitcoin to go around. And I'm glad I have Kent with me today because we're going to be breaking that down in a little bit. Now, the second point here is Eric Balchunas, of course, Bloomberg senior, I believe it's ETF analyst or senior ETF analyst. I always forget that. He goes, the spot Bitcoin ETFs are coming into 2026 like a lion, plus $1.2 in flows in first 2 days of the year with everyone eating. That's $115 billion a year pace. I told y'all if they can take 22 billion when it's raining, imagine when the sun is shining. So first point here, guys, it seems like the bull market exuberance is kind of coming back in. Obviously, we are not out of the woods here. But the first point is watching the ETF inflows. It is getting very interesting just to start off the year. Now, of course, what we saw in the first week of this year doesn't necessarily mean that's what we're going to see throughout the whole rest of the year, but it is a good start. Now, Kent, I know you're on the mining side, so maybe the ETFs aren't the most important thing, or rather maybe not something that you really keep too much of an eye on, but it's obviously, I think, telling us a greater trend of what's going on. For better or worse, the institutions are here and they want your Bitcoin. Now, obviously, I think you and I have a few of our own personal views of what people should be doing. And, we'll probably chat about that in a minute. But 2025, at this point, I'm convinced it changed everything. The institutions are here, and I think they were just dipping their toes in 2025. 2026 seems to be the year that they're going to really, in fact, go all in. So, Ken, before I get into the big news story, what's your thoughts on the ETF inflows and the fact that it's coming back on the table?
Well, so you're right. I don't pay much attention to it because when you're sourcing energy and keeping hardware running, that's a very different game than, paper Bitcoin. However, that said, supply demand does impact my business. So keep a loose eye on it. And especially at least once a month when I come on with you guys, I get to check it out. But the inflows, I think, Opti, I was on almost exactly a month ago. I looked it up before jumping on here, December 2nd. That was my first time ever giving a public declaration that the bottom is in. 30 days later, that still stands. So I think that what we're seeing here, and I'm not saying the bottom, I'm going to be right all time here, but I do love what I'm seeing. And it feels like 2025 for me, actually, I've categorized it in my head as a bear market, just straight up. Yeah. And the reason why is because I price it in gold. It's just too much funny business with me, for me, with the dollar. gold is a much more stable asset to measure Bitcoin's price against. And Bitcoin was clearly in a bear market all of 2025. In fact, there's a bunch of like bear market bottom indicators that have gone off in the last couple of weeks. So if you look at it from that standpoint, clearly the 4-year cycle is dead. And what we're seeing is an influx of capital from institutions. You know, I believe it was 2026 when the new accounting rules go into play, that Michael Saylor helped to put into place where you can mark to market more frequently to take advantage of the price appreciation. So it makes sense to me that like businesses would be pouring capital in, institutions would be pouring capital in. So my thesis continues to be, look, the beach ball has been buried underwater. We've based for an entire year when you price it in Bitcoin, basically went sideways, was very close to the open and close price at the end of the year, from the beginning of 2025 till the end of 2025. And if you price it in gold, clearly a down year. So everything is lining up for this like just crazy situation. And I said this to some of my buddies over Christmas vacation. But you look at 2025 and what I thought was possible in 2025, that bar has actually been set higher for me in my mind because of that sideways motion of the Bitcoin price action. I think we just have a massive base, and it's possible that we break up to heights that we didn't even really think were all that possible last year. So yeah, I'm wildly bullish this year, and call me delusional, but I'll take it.
Well, I think everyone knows I'm delusionally optimistic and bullish every single day. Even in the face of the data, I'm like, nah, dude, don't trust the charts. And well, like I know what's happening. I'm usually trolling when I say that, but anyways, I mean, look, Kent, at this point, as I was saying yesterday, we can start taking our warm-up victory lap because we've been right. And as I joked with you in the morning before the show, I'm like, look, hey, we've been right for 30 days, but like, I'm okay if I'm right for 30 minutes. So, we'll take the W's when we get them. But anyways, no one wants to hear us brag about stuff. They want to hear about the big news story here. And it's, of course, Morgan Stanley seeks SEC approval for a spot Bitcoin ETF. Now, I know last year we talked about the ETFs a lot. It was kind of the big conversation for the first part of the year. It was like all the rage. Then kind of the Bitcoin treasury meme kind of came up, and that's what everyone was talking about. Now, this might not seem like a significant move considering all of last year we talked about the Bitcoin ETFs, but it is kind of showing you a couple of trends. One, of course, institutions are starting to make moves into Bitcoin, which is what we started to see happen at the end of last year. And then the second one is that this ETF is slightly different. And I think this is where the competition starts to come in. So let me kind of break this down. Morgan Stanley, of course, filed with the U.S. regulators to launch a spot Bitcoin ETF, marking the first time a major U.S. bank has sought approval to issue an ETF tied directly to the price of Bitcoin. You heard it here. It's the first time. Now, if approved, the fund would hold Bitcoin directly rather than relying on futures, derivatives, or leverage, according to the registration statement. And then Morgan Stanley's entry signals a shift by large banks from distributing third-party crypto products towards issuing their own. And again, going further, the proposed Bitcoin trust would be sponsored by Morgan Stanley Investment Management. Shares would be created and redeemed in large blocks by authorized participants, either in cash or in kind, which is a huge shift. Now that the in-kind redemptions are possible, it seems like they're just going to go straight there. They're going to ignore all of the other BS. So on some level, I think this is a significant difference based on the other ETFs. Now, by offering a proprietary Bitcoin ETF, the firm can integrate the product directly into client portfolios and retain management fees that might otherwise go to rival issuers. So you can see they are starting to see, at least on one hand, just Morgan Stanley, or maybe as one example, they're starting to see that, yeah, there is a lot to gain from getting into the Bitcoin ETF. And remember last year, the big saga about Vanguard, they're finally kind of bending the knee. Morgan Stanley, which I do have a little story with one of my friends. I brought it up before, but I'll get to that later. And then just to kind of highlight the significance of the fact that it's under Morgan Stanley, the company, and they're putting their stamp of approval on this ETF. Morgan Stanley manages 20 ETFs. but mostly under the Calvert, Parametric, Eaton Vance brands. These will be the third and fourth ETFs to bear the quote Morgan Stanley brand. Pretty remarkable, which is kind of one of the smaller themes I've been covering on the show, that as much as Bitcoiners, we may not like the institutions coming in, I think they're starting to realize that this isn't something they can ignore anymore. It's not something that they could just relegate to the darkest corners of the internet. They have to, at this point, essentially put their reputation on the line to back this new thing, to back the gains that Bitcoin has had. Whereas in the past, it was very easy to, have your career hurt if you embrace Bitcoin. And now it's becoming very clear it's the opposite. If you are not embracing Bitcoin, your customers are probably looking at you like, yo, what are you doing? What am I paying you for if you're missing out on the best performing asset in the last 15, 17 years? Yeah, last year wasn't the best, but I think the trend is growing ever more, that every bank now at this point is probably going to have some form of Bitcoin ETF, some form of Bitcoin product. And let's not forget, JP Morgan is out here now doing Bitcoin collateral. So the times are very interesting. Now, as I said, I view you should just buy Bitcoin directly, take it into cold storage. I've been kind of harping on this idea that the biggest attack happening right now is most likely coming from Wall Street. They want your Bitcoin, so it's up to you to not give them your Bitcoin, no matter what shiny product they give you. That's the game right now, in my opinion. But anyways, let me reel this back. Kent, what do you think the significance of Morgan Stanley offering this ETF, particularly in the fact that they're not doing futures, derivatives, or leverage ETFs, and they are doing right out the gate in cash or in-kind redemptions, which is a stark contrast to all the other ETFs. Though now, as you kind of said, the regulatory clarity, it's a little more open. That we have a lot better rules now. The capabilities are there. So I think it's a smart move that they just right out the gate are like, hey, look, we're Morgan Stanley. We're going to do in-kind Bitcoin ETFs. We're going to buy spot Bitcoin. And further, we're going to do all this in-house and not rely on any of the other third-party custodies, particularly if you remember, JP Morgan is the authorized participant of the Blackrock ETF. So I think that you can see that there is some, I don't know if you want to call it infighting or war in factions between these big banks, but they're starting to see the game theory, and the competition, I think, is going to heat up in 2026.
Yeah, man. I think Morgan Stanley's in it to win it here is what I'm seeing. The game theory says you want to have the best product so that you can acquire the most amount of Bitcoin. And this is just capitalism at play. They're coming to market saying, how do I outcompete? I'm going to file an ETF. I want to absorb as much Bitcoin as possible, and I need to differentiate myself. And this is clear differentiation. I think it's wonderful to see a big bank figure out how to take custody of Bitcoin directly instead of outsource that. I think that helps to alleviate some of the risk that I see with Coinbase as like a massive honeypot potentially for a sovereign entity like the US to come after at some point. But the fact that Morgan Stanley is taking that step, I don't know about the rest of you guys, but when it comes to custody of Bitcoin, I don't really trust banks with my dollars. Why should I trust them with my Bitcoin? It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So I'm going to just preach, self-custody, hold it, figure it out yourself, be an adult and manage private keys. And yes, it's not simple or trivial. And yes, there's better UX and better products that are coming out to help with that. But I think if you're in Bitcoin and not doing self-custody, then you're not part of the intolerant minority that can actually help us separate money and state. So what are you doing? Get out of fiat land and come over to Bitcoin land and participate with the rest of us in this movement for freedom here. So I love what Morgan Stanley's doing, the direction. I do think it'll differentiate and lead to more Bitcoin absorption in their ETF over time, maybe not instantly as people realize the differentiation there. But I think most importantly is that in-kind redemption, because I actually think the in-kind redemption is ultimately how we get away from paper Bitcoin. Because if people can deposit Bitcoin and withdraw Bitcoin out of an ETF, that means that it's going to be much harder for paper games to be played. So I think that's a healthy step forward, that the game theory and the competition is driving them in that direction. And you know, the big banks, they're all out for themselves anyway. So they might play a monopolistic game when they can, but when it comes down to free market competition, which Bitcoin represents, it's going to divide the herd. And I think that's healthy for all of us to have Wall Street kind of playing the same game, which is, hey, how do I stack as much Bitcoin as I can?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, every time, you know, it is interesting when you look at Wall Street, obviously from like a Bitcoiner's perspective, and probably from like a Main Street perspective, just like an average person perspective, there is kind of a, I don't know, like a bad taste in our mouths when we talk about Wall Street. It's like, oh, Wall Street, a bunch of greedy people, you know, capitalism's bad, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But when you see stuff like this, it really does remind you that when you're in Bitcoin, it's a Mexican standoff. Everyone is looking out for themselves. And that's what kind of keeps the Bitcoin incentives in line, because if you do partner with someone, you might get smoked. Like, you might make the wrong move. And now everyone's realizing, wait, like, my neck is on the chopping block here. If I don't make the moves correctly, if I don't look out for my own team, if I don't look out for myself as an individual, there's a potential to literally, you know, get completely wiped out here. And I love that you brought that up, because few people understand that, you know, when you talk about the quote unquote elites, everyone thinks it's like a monolithic, everyone's on the same team. They're in like a back room, you know, coordinating everything. Some of them might be, but when you see moves like this, you realize like, oh no, like they're all out for themselves here. And this is a benefit to every single one of us. So I love that you brought that up. Now, I do want to bring up one kind of story. I told you guys on the show, when I was back home, I was talking with one of my friends, and I didn't mention the bank he was working at, but he was telling me, he's like, oh, the big banks aren't really getting into Bitcoin. You know, like, yeah, it's slowly happening, but he's still feeding the TradFi party line. And my other friend, he's not really into Bitcoin yet, but he's known I've been into Bitcoin for forever. And he was like, yeah, they're kind of getting into Bitcoin. Well, now officially, I think I could bring it out. He does work at Morgan Stanley. And now I really want to text him and be like, yo, so like, what were you saying? It's literally been about 1 week into 2026. And now your company's going into Bitcoin. So if I text him, I'll see if his official narrative has shifted on this, because now his bosses are saying, hey, you know, we're trying to roll out some Bitcoin products. So it's very interesting how quickly narratives can shift when the big bosses are like, yep, we're going all in. So I might have some more news on that one in a little bit. But anyways, one last thing I want to bring up here. And like I said, this is when I'm very happy Kent's with me today, because this last kind of idea, I think, really puts everything into perspective and where we are in the story and where we can potentially be in 2026. So here is, I've really liked this guy's account. He kind of just came up on my radar recently. But it's what is it? ZenX Bitcoin. Love the name too. Anyways, he goes, just 3 companies are eating up the entire Bitcoin issuance. If you add the Bitcoin ETFs on top, you can see that this is not sustainable. A reminder, Bitcoin purchases in Q4. Strategy bought 32,466 Bitcoin. Tether bought 8,888 Bitcoin. Metaplanet bought 3,672 for a total of 45,026 Bitcoin. And Bitcoin mined in Q4 was roughly 41,260 Bitcoin. The supply is diminishing, yet demand is soaring. This only ends one way, guys. Buckle up. It's going to get crazy out there. And this is, of course, where our reigning in-house miner expert comes in. I'd have to go do some quick math, and maybe you have it off the top of our head, but I think people forget just how little Bitcoin enters the ecosystem per year, per month. And if these ETFs do start to hoover up $150 billion of Bitcoin, Metaplanet, Strategy, Tether, even like American Bitcoin mining company, like the Bitcoin treasury companies, if they maintain the buying pressure that they have been able to in 2025 on top of these ETF interests, it's hard to not get bullish. And finally, maybe Rustin will be, you know, vindicated of the mother of all supply shocks. Like you said, 2026 might be that year.
Oh man, I'd love it to be. I think there is going to come a point when it's going to happen, right? So let me just break down some numbers because I think people miss the forest for the trees when it comes to mining. It's super simple. You get 3.125 new Bitcoin per block coming into the supply side, right? A block happens every 10 minutes. Roughly, that's, there's an organic nature to that, but roughly 6 blocks an hour. So if you multiply that all out by 24 hours a day, you get 450 Bitcoin a day. At today's price of Bitcoin, 95,000, that's a little more, it's close to $43 million worth of supply has to be taken off every day for more buying than selling pressure to occur. That's not much, guys. And that's why at some point this is unsustainable. At some point, it is a situation where the beach ball has been buried underwater for too long and it will go floating to the surface because just 450 Bitcoin a day, that's not much purchasing pressure. So the buyers have to overwhelm the sellers by just 450 Bitcoin a day for us to eventually get to a point where the float, the free floating liquid supply of Bitcoin out there, which I think last I saw was like 2.2 million, down from like 2.6 at the start of last year. There is a point when there's just not enough supply to buy and price has to adjust to make up the difference. So let's see if it happens this year. There will come a point where it does happen. I firmly believe that. It is looking pretty doggone exciting this year, but I'm not, I made a bottom call last time I was on. I'm not making a God candle call this time though.
No. Yeah, well, that's my job.
Yeah,
I haven't called for a God candle yet, but I am starting to get a lot more bullish. Obviously, today we did get like a little pullback at a kind of known resistance level around that 94K. Obviously, the day is not over. I saw some people trolling that right when we started the show, the price started dumping and we should just get off air because they're totally listening to Simply Bitcoin to trade right now, which I literally was talking about yesterday. Bitcoiners and their superstitions are absolutely amazing. It's one of my favorite things to talk about. But yeah, it's just when you look at the math, again, the math just doesn't math. The amount of buying. Now, you could argue, as we were saying a minute ago, it was paper Bitcoin summer. Now, there might be a lot of paper Bitcoin in the system right now or in the ecosystem. And that can potentially, exaggerate what is going on. But if these ETF, if these institutions, if the Bitcoin treasury companies are buying all the Bitcoin they claim to buy, now that it looks like the sellers from the OGs, from those transitioning into ETFs, it seems like the selling is finally over. And if that's the case, then we all know the beach ball theory. Look, I don't want to get too bullish. I'm not going to Samson Mao you guys and say Omega, God can, I forget which one's which, is happening overnight. But it is starting to look a little frothy. And I have been seeing some TA chart boy guys out there like saying the Wyckoff distribution or this other one like Adam and Eve pattern. I'm like, I don't even know what that means. I just watched the 1 minute chart and I'm like, all right, we're pumping. This feels good. Or we're dumping. This feels bad. But it does seem like 2025, maybe all, like you said, all the gains we thought we were going to have in 2025, they may have been delayed into 2026. Now, I have seen a bunch of people in the chat say like Q2 2026 is when we go up, boys. They've been saying that for like 6 months. So the time hasn't happened yet, but I'm with you. The amount of buying pressure compared to the amount of Bitcoin that is going to get released, at a certain point, something has to give. And we all know when it does give, it's going to go to the upside. So keep stacking. You are literally getting Bitcoin on discount right now. We all know where it's going to go eventually. But in the current moment, it is interesting just to see how bad sentiment is when, the narratives are really in our favor currently. Yes, we're not out of the woods yet, but it is starting to get bullish. I know you say you don't want to give any price predictions, but could you at least tell us if you're continuing to stay bullish or is there any concerns?
Yeah, dude, I've come across as a total bear, have I? No, of course, I'm massively bullish this year. I'm actually I was bullish going into 2025 just on the faith of the 4-year price cycle. I'm now bullish going into 2026 based on the actual facts of the macro narrative. You know, you've got the change in accounting rules. You've got institutions have been more warmed up to Bitcoin. You've got the stability and the price action differential between gold and silver and the liquidity that's out there. It just feels like the paper Bitcoin games cannot go on for much longer. And, you know, a fact that we haven't talked about that I've seen multiple charts on is, you know, the OG sellers, which was a massive narrative last year, are now buyers in the marketplace, right? Like that chart is flipped. So you just look at all these indicators. It's just like, why is anybody surprised that we've come out of the chute in a strong way this year? And if you look at the price action, I mean, guys, we ran from like 88K to 95K in like, what, 2-3 days here? Very bullish looking price action. To see us pull back to retest like 90, 91K, that's normal. I'm not worried about it. Sure, I like the 1 minute opium charts too. Not even opium charts, but just adrenaline charts, right? It's just like, just mainline yourself with some caffeine. Why don't you? If you're going to watch those charts, it's crazy. But you know, if you like the spikes of adrenaline, go for it. But you know, just zoom out and look at the bigger picture. That's all I'd say. And the bigger picture is doggone sexy for Bitcoin's price this year.
Yeah, 100%. And yeah, on the 1 minute chart, I was trolling about this at the end of the year. I'm like, yeah, let's look at the 1 minute chart. And then the whole chat's like, yo, Opti, bring up the 1 minute chart, bro. Like, I need it today. And I'm like, we don't even trade the 1 minute chart. We just like watching sentiment in real time. It's just like you said, it's a good emotional rush. It's a good dopamine rush, whether it's up or down. You're like, oh, okay, we're pumping. Oh, okay, we're dumping. The BARTs on the 1 minute have been insane the last couple of weeks. So, hey, at the very least, guys, we can say that the fun is coming back into Bitcoin. I know we had a stable coin all of 2025. Actually, it wasn't even a stable coin. It was a negative stable coin at this point. We lost some gains on it. But overall, let's just hope we get some volatility back in the market. Let's hope we get some fun, because when the volatility comes back, it's when you feel alive again, whether it's down or up. You're like, yep, this is what I was in for. This stable coin, I did not sign up for a stable coin. Okay, I signed up for mass amounts of volatility, up or down. But let's hope we get it in 2026. I guess that's my ending hope here. 2026 is the year of volatility. To the upside, though. Last year, we were not clear on where we wanted the volatility to be, and it really did backfire on us because it was a volatile to the downside. But hey, beggars can't be choosers at this point. Anyways, guys, let's keep it moving. So to kind of continue this trend of institutions, there was an interesting clip coming out of the Coinbase Prime institutional manager who is basically confirming what we've been saying about institutions coming in. And then in the news, we had an interesting kind of story break from Bitcoin Magazine surrounding the Samurai Wallet devs Bitcoin, which I think kind of goes into the broader conversation of what is actually happening from the Trump administration around Bitcoin, or whether there is a lot of dissension coming from within the ranks, which it seems to be the case. And then, of course, in the culture, we're going to talk all things mining with Kent. So get your questions ready. If you want to ask Kent about mining, we're going to have a good conversation. Make sure you stay with us till the end. On that note, we will be right back after this commercial break.
Today's episode is brought to you by Bitcoin Well Infinite. If you're a serious Bitcoin buyer, you've probably hit the same wall. Most platforms make you give up custody just to play by the rules. Bitcoin Well Infinite fixes that. They're North America's only publicly traded, non-custodial OTC desk listed on the TSX Venture Exchange, which means transparent operations and zero counterparty risk.
You buy Bitcoin, you take immediate control, period. For trades over $50,000, you get a dedicated executive Bitcoin advisor, competitive spread starting at 1%, and immediate delivery straight to your own wallet. No custody risk, no withdrawal fees, just institutional grade execution with full asset control. If you want to buy Bitcoin the right way, book a free consultation at bitcoinwell.com/OTC or email infinite@bitcoinwell.com.
I want to give a shout out to our partner, Stampseed. Is your Bitcoin in cold storage really secure? Are your seed phrases really secure? Stamp Seed's do-it-yourself kit has everything you'll need for you to hammer your seed words into commercial-grade titanium plates instead of just writing them down on paper. Paper is fragile. Titanium plates are strong. Your words are actually stamped into the titanium plate with this hammer and these letter stamping tools. Once the words are in, they aren't going anywhere. No risk of the plate breaking apart and pieces falling everywhere. Titanium stamp seeds will survive nearly triple the heat produced by a house fire. They're also crush-proof, waterproof, non-corrosive, and time-proof. And now you can customize your titanium seed plates. You can upload your design or logo and they will laser engrave it on the back of your seed plate, the opposite side of where the words are. Stamp your seed on Stamp Seed and use promo code SIMPLY to get 15% off anything on the stampseed.com store.
All right, guys. All right, we are back. The current Bitcoin price is 91,810. Dude, we were at like 94 a couple of hours ago. Anyways, the discount from all-time high is 27.2%, market cap 1.83 trillion, and the block height TikTok next block 931,166. I repeat, 931,166. Okay, guys, so we got a new clip from Coinbase institutional. I forget what his official name is. It's like institutional advisor or Coinbase Prime institutional head of institutional demand or something, whatever. Anyways, he works with institutions on Coinbase. He's got a little more of insight into what is happening on the back end, which obviously from our perspective, we can really only know what's going on via the headlines and conversations that we have with people. This guy worked with the institutions directly. He's been going on all kinds of podcast and shows essentially saying, hey, the institutions are here and they're not scared of what they saw in Bitcoin in 2025. So let's play that clip to kind of, add a little more sauce to what we were talking about in the beginning of the show.
So it did, and it is. And this is sort of what's been frustrating for those of us who work on the institutional side for the last 6-7 months has been the delta between retail negative sentiment and institutional and regulatory momentum. So we look back at last year, and I must have been on 20 shows talking about how bad Bitcoin was doing. Net down 6% for the entire year. Right. This is an asset that's been the best performing asset by far, by a mile. It's been the GOAT 9 out of 12 years. So institutions understood that. So I don't know a single institution that was putting in the work on crypto and Bitcoin last year that stopped because the asset experienced, quite frankly, typical volatility and was down 6%.
So there was nobody who paused or said to you early in the year, we're thinking of going this direction, we're going to do this, and then called you up and said, you know what, we're going to wait till 26 and see where things are.
On the institutional side?
Yeah.
No. If anything, the rapidly increasing regulatory momentum moved them faster. I think today versus a year ago, I don't know of a single large company that doesn't have an AI and blockchain strategy, or at least thinking of one.
Interesting. Now, obviously, I don't like the AI and blockchain strategy. That sounds a little shitcoinery, but I do like the institutions know that Bitcoin is the GOAT. I kind of missed that the first time going around listening to this clip. I was like, did I hear that right? He's like, yeah. They all know Bitcoin's the GOAT, basically. I'm like, all right, bet. But that's kind of, the greater trend going on. Now, the most interesting part about this to me is while we were making content, talking about Bitcoin every day, a lot of Bitcoiners because us Bitcoiners are technically retail, though. I think there is a little difference in nuance in that word where I consider retail like new people coming into Bitcoin. If you're in Bitcoin for a while, yes, you're technically retail, but I think we're kind of like a different category here. It's like, the average person getting into Bitcoin, Bitcoiners, and then the institutions trying to acquire as much of this as possible. Anyways, from the Bitcoiners that I've been talking to towards the end of the year, it is very obvious that sentiment around Bitcoin was probably at all-time low. Even though we did hit all-time high, we've been holding up above around 100K for the most part of the year. Yes, we got a little drop. it seemed like everyone was freaking out about Bitcoin, when now that the year is over and we're going into 2026, it's interesting to hear that the institutions, at least from Coinbase's institutional head of strategies, like, yeah, none of them were freaking out. In fact, they were trying to get into this faster because they knew where this is headed. If that's not a sign of the times, if that's not a sign of what is happening behind the scenes, hence with the Morgan Stanley trying to file an ETF, we saw JP Morgan going into Bitcoin. Obviously, BlackRock's gone into Bitcoin. I think all of the major banks at this point have positioned themselves for Bitcoin products heading into 2026. It's like a perfect storm here. Now, obviously, again, not the biggest fan of paper Bitcoin, bigger fan of taking Bitcoin into custody. But I do understand if you have more of these traditional investment vehicles, say a 401k, why you would use these Wall Street products. But it's all saying the same thing. They want your Bitcoin. You know, they're bullish on Bitcoin. What's my favorite saying that on shitcoiners is like, shitcoiners are not, they don't not like Bitcoin. They just like your Bitcoin more. I think we can start to say the same thing about institutions. It's not that they don't like Bitcoin. They just want your Bitcoin at this point. So it's upon you to not give them your Bitcoin. That's the biggest message I'm going to be saying for a while on this show. I'm going to be a broken record. Just stack Bitcoin, take it into custody, take it into cold storage. And this is how you ensure you survive whatever shenanigans happen from a Wall Street perspective. Anyways, Kent, I'm ranting and I can barely even breathe right now because of this, mucus, this weird cold I have going on. So I'm going to pass you the mic here. I know this is kind of similar to what we were just saying a minute ago. The institutions are very clearly here, and anyone that's telling you otherwise, even Jamie Dimon himself, he might sometimes be a little more vague. He'll go like, oh yeah, blockchain is good, tokenize all the things. But in reality, when you hear them talk about it, they're all really wanting to figure out how to position themselves into Bitcoin. So what's your takeaway watching this clip? You're muted, bro. You're muted.
I got you. Put me in, coach. I'll give you the
You're
breather.
back. You're back.
Gotcha. So the, I think largely we were deluded as a Bitcoin community when the ETFs launched, and we said, so I got into Bitcoin 2015. So let me give a narrative arc here over time. When I got in, the conversation was always ETF, when an institution's coming, we're going to pump our bags, et cetera, et cetera. And I think we all just really underestimated what reality of institutional adoption meant when it showed up on our doorstep. And when it showed up on our doorstep, we just didn't pace ourselves. We were used to the price just swinging and whips on. But guys and gals, we're in the trillions here for market cap. Load another trillion onto the ledger is not a trivial business, let alone another 10 trillion if we want to go battle for stored value with gold, right? We need the institutions to be able to do it. And guess what? The institutions are used to playing a Wall Street game. So they're going to play the Wall Street game. And that's, I think, a lot of why we've seen what we've seen with Bitcoin's price action this last year. So this is a weird, I don't know if you call it a wall of worry or just the wall of Wall Street that we've been climbing over here. But I think it's a matter of just like not getting bored with this institutional activity, because they move at glacial speed. But don't kid yourselves. Like when they catch the game theory and the FOMO that the rest of us have, there's a lot of capital that's going to flow into this. And we are going to see that upside that's been suppressed. But it's a boring ass game, and they're going to try to jawbone us all out of our Bitcoin in the meantime, because that's what Wall Street has been great at. Over time, they've been great at building these narratives. That's why on the last time I was on, I said the bottom is in, because I didn't even know until the show that two massive Wall Street institutions were coming out in a bullish attitude at the exact same time as like the Fed was ending quantitative tightening and moving to quantitative easing. Like that's the way that Wall Street has always jawboned the market. And yes, they've been jawboning us. And I think we've been the suckers in the room without realizing it with the 4-year price cycle. And now finally, it's getting to the point where they played all the games that they can play. Even Morgan Stanley coming out now and having in-kind redemptions that's going to push the all the ETFs in that direction over time, assuming that they wind up being more competitive and absorbing more Bitcoin, which I believe they will. But assuming it all is going that direction, there's only the runway for Wall Street games is going to come to an end. And then the ride's going to get a lot more fun and a lot more exciting again. So my advice on all of this is just hold through the boring times, touch grass, do other things with life. Just hold and save your Bitcoin, because it's all going to go the right direction. Have faith.
Yeah, I really wish I could completely log off and touch grass constantly, but it's kind of my job to keep up to date with stuff. That would be my advice too. Don't just buy Bitcoin hoping that they're going to pump your bags. It's about constantly acquiring Bitcoin and then doing nothing. I actually saw this really good tweet. It wasn't even about Bitcoin, but it was about this guy. He's like, yeah, I had a good conversation with this guy that trades, and he makes like 1.2 million a year trading other stuff outside of Bitcoin. And he kind of asked him, he's like, all right, like what is your secret? Like, what do you do? He's like, I literally look for one kind of formation that I know how to trade. And then I trade that when I see it. And when I don't, I literally do nothing. And the hardest part about it is being patient and doing nothing, which is kind of a sentiment that Bitcoiners we've been talking about for a long time. I believe, what is it, like Warren Buffett or Charlie Munger say something very similar. They're like, look, the reason we are so successful is because the hardest part of trading is literally doing nothing. Now with Bitcoin, it is a little different, because our doing nothing means just like, slowly acquiring Bitcoin. It's like you're not necessarily doing nothing per se. You're just like constantly very boring, pragmatic view of this. It's like, okay, I make this much money. I can buy this much Bitcoin every week. I'll be good. And yes, the boring time, as we all saw last year, I was losing my mind on just how boring the year was. And now I'm really hoping it's not that boring this year, because I'm really going to lose my mind this year. I'm going to be like I don't know if you guys ever read the short story Yellow Wallpaper. I'm going to be doing, circles around the wall and messing up the wallpaper, because what are we going to talk about if it's not a bullish, incredible year? Your boy's just going to be eating some steaks and hanging out by the pool or something. So I'll figure it out. But yes, doing nothing is the hardest thing in trading. And this isn't just coming from Bitcoiners. It's coming from anyone that trades. So, do with that information as you will. Me and Kent been in this for a while, and that's literally the hardest part, is just acquiring Bitcoin and chilling through all the volatility and continuing to acquire that Bitcoin, continuing to take it into cold storage. It's not that exciting. I have always joked, like, how many times can we just tell people to buy Bitcoin, store Bitcoin, and repeat the process? It's like we figure out a million ways to tell you the same thing. Just continue to accumulate Bitcoin. This is how you win. Anyways, we do have an interesting news story here. This one is kind of interesting going on the news, coming around the Samurai Wallet dev kind of case and what happened with the Bitcoin that they basically gave up. Very interesting stuff. So we'll be right back after another commercial break.
I want to give a shout out to our partner, Ledin, the leader in Bitcoin-backed loans. Unlock the liquidity in your Bitcoin without having to sell your Bitcoin. They've issued $9 billion in loans to over 10,000 customers since 2018. I absolutely love these guys. Not only do I have an account with them, but I also have a loan. And what I love about them is that there are no monthly payments, and you could pay back the loan at any time. As soon as you send your Bitcoin as collateral, you'll have cash in your account within 24 hours. Over 1,000 five-star customer reviews, and they've never lost a single dollar or sat of customer money. Go to learn.ledin.io/simply today, and you'll get 0.25% off your first loan. I want to give a shout out to our partner, sat123.com. Sovereignty isn't just about your money. It's about your communications too. When the grid goes down, most people go dark. Cell towers fail in hurricanes, cyber attacks, and blackouts. But satellite phones? They don't rely on local infrastructure. Iridium has 77 satellites in orbit, giving you a direct line anywhere in the US, even offshore. If you hold your own Bitcoin keys, you should hold your own comms too. Sat123.com also has everything you need to start building your Bitcoin citadel. Starlink, battery backups, Faraday bags to protect your hardware wallets, and much, much more. It's a one-stop shop for anyone serious about resilience and off-grid independence. Stay connected, stay independent, stay sovereign. Go to sat123.com/simply today and use promo code SIMPLY to get 15% off anything on the store.
I want to give a shout out to our partner, BitKey. If you already self-custody your Bitcoin, you know the deal with hardware wallets by now. Complex setups, clumsy interfaces, and a seed phrase that can be lost, stolen, or forgotten. BitKey fixes that. BitKey is a multi-sig hardware wallet built by the team behind Square and Cash App. It packs a cryptographic recovery system and built-in inheritance feature into an intuitive, easy-to-use wallet with no seed phrase to sweat over. It's simple, secure, self-custody without the stress. Time named BitKey one of the best inventions of 2024. Get 20% off at bitkey.world. That's BITKEY.world with the code SIMPLY.
Alrighty then, guys. So I honestly thought that this could have been today's headline story, but we did talk about the strategic Bitcoin reserve yesterday, and I wasn't sure if you guys are like, oh, they're rehashing the same story again, like they got nothing to talk about, bro. But I think this is, you know, a big story on a lot of different fronts. So what am I talking about? Shouts out to Frank Corva, of course. The I forget what his official title is, but it's like the official White House crypto press advisor conference. I don't know. Again, you guys know me. I can barely remember a freaking quote from someone I've been saying for a million times. So forgive me, Frank, but he works at Bitcoin Magazine. He is in the White House asking Trump questions. And of course, he writes over at Bitcoin Magazine. Anyways, he posted this yesterday, or I believe it was yesterday. Could have been this morning, whatever. Anyways, the headline is, did the DOJ prosecutors violate Trump's executive order by selling the forfeited Samurai wallet Bitcoin? Now, I know from a more hardcore Bitcoin perspective, you're like, that's a good thing. Let's get this Bitcoin out of the US's hands. But I think this just conversation brings up a lot of questions of what is actually happening within the White House, or rather within these institutions around Bitcoin. Now, I will read a little bit, not too much. I know you guys yell at me when I read too much, but on November 3rd, 2025, it seems that the U.S. Marshal Service, at the direction of the Department of Justice, used Coinbase Prime to liquidate the Bitcoin that the Samurai developers forfeited as part of their plea deal, likely violating President Trump's mandate to keep such Bitcoin in the United States strategy Bitcoin reserve. It seems they sold roughly $6.3 million worth of Bitcoin that the Samurai wallet developers paid the DOJ as a fee that was part of their guilty plea. In doing so, it has potentially violated Executive Order 14233, which mandates that Bitcoin acquired via criminal or civil asset forfeiture proceedings should be held as part of the United States strategy Bitcoin reserve. If the Southern District of New York, the federal judicial district in which the Samurai case was to be tried, did in fact violate Executive Order 14233, it would not be the first time employees of the SDNY have acted in defiance of direction from the federal government. So again, going into this, what happened, according to the document titled Asset Liquidation Agreement, which has been obtained by Bitcoin Magazine exclusively, the Bitcoin that was forfeited is to be sold or already has been. Now, there is a UTXO, an address that this was linked to. And apparently, if you're looking at the blockchain explorers, they have no Bitcoin left. So it seems like they already sold that Bitcoin, but as per the document, the defendants agreed to transfer roughly, or rather 57.55 Bitcoin at the time the final party signed the agreement, and the Bitcoin was sent to an address on November 3rd. Instead, it seems that it has been sent to Coinbase Prime, and now that address has literally no Bitcoin left. So it seemingly has been sold. The Coinbase Prime address currently has a zero balance as well, indicating that it has been sold. Obviously, from a, pro Trump view here. It seems like the DOJ or the SDNY is actively fighting the, Bitcoin superpower of the world meme, the rhetoric. On the other hand, like what Lola Leeds, who's been doing a great work covering a lot of the stuff coming out of the Trump administration, or rather politics and the White House and DC in general, this is kind of her take. Friendly reminder that the Treasury has not even fulfilled the most basic task orders in Executive Order 14233. Essay compiling as, for example, compiling a list of assets held by each agency or assessments on transfer authority, which means that the Trump is either being defied by all his agencies or that he is a liar. Now, of course, some people will take whatever side of this, though it does seem like we have here the executive director, the new President Council of Advisors for Digital Assets, saying we are looking into this. So, I guess we're all just monitoring the situation, even people at the Digital Assets Working Group. But I think this does kind of bring up the greater conversation, as we've kind of been covering since the Samurai Wallet DOJ case in general. It does bring up the question of, is the war on Bitcoin officially over? Now, it does seem from the Trump administration, or at least those that are under Trump, it does seem like they are embracing Bitcoin, whether, it's them kind of forcing the SEC, the CFTC to make favorable regulations around Bitcoin, whether it's announcing the executive order in the first place, acquiring Bitcoin, whether it's them, potentially seizing 600,000 Bitcoin from Venezuela, which is still unconfirmed. It does seem like they are serious about the strategic Bitcoin reserve. So like that last part, I know Lola Leach is not the biggest fan of Trump, which is why she's saying maybe Trump is lying. I think what is probably more the case, which is just where it happened. Remember, I was showing you guys the Maduro perp walk in New York City. And we all know the new mayor, he's a very proud socialist here. So it does seem like there is a divergence between what is happening in some states that are, more left-leaning, that are very anti-Trump. And it does seem like they're doing whatever they can to defy Trump. Now, I think the interesting take here is that obviously they're by definition kind of hurting the people they are supposed to represent, because in our opinion, Bitcoin is going to go up. But there is, I think, within most institutions right now, there is a lot of people dissenting from the Trump agenda. And I think you can very easily argue that that's probably why there's been so much confusion on whether what Trump is doing good for us as Americans. Is it bad? Is this them, as Simon Dixon always says, just continuing the financial industrial complex? But on the one hand, my personal take on this is, look, obviously this is the separation of money and state here. The more Bitcoin they can get rid of, I think it's better for most of us people. On the other hand, it does go against the strategic Bitcoin reserve narrative, which I think was one of the bigger catalysts to get Bitcoin above the last all-time high. So I think it goes into more on the culture war going on right now. A lot of people that currently hold power are really dislike Trump, and they're doing everything they can to sabotage him. And I think this might be something similar going on. So it's kind of my take on this. But Kent, I don't know. What's your thoughts when you hear something like this?
I'm actually going through the actors in this, and quick question for you, Opti, see if you know the answer, because I don't. Is Frank Corva the one at the White House that that asked in the press conference about Keone? Was that Frank?
No, I don't think it was. No, it was someone else. I think it was someone at CoinDesk that asked about pardoning Keone. But yeah, that's the other wrinkle here. Trump did say he might pardon them. So it is very interesting, all of these different factors playing out, or variables playing out in real time.
Well, so here's what I'm seeing here, and it's a different take than yours. But the Southern District of New York has been a problematic jurisdiction in general, judicially, right? Like, there's been a lot of things that have come out of there. I couldn't list all of them for you if I tried right here, but they've largely been a judicial authority kind of moving to the beat of their own drum. So what I mean by that, if you know the details of the Keone case with Samurai, so there's two devs there. Keone's in jail already. He turned himself in like the week before Christmas. He was given, so the federal authority that was over like money transmitter rules, like already stated, gave them a written statement, the Southern District of New York, a written statement that what they did not violate anything. And so these guys have gone to prison largely for no reason other than the Southern District of New York wanting to prove a point. They didn't have to follow through with the sentencing. And legally, it doesn't look like they've got a lot of backstop, but these guys they pled guilty because they were fearful of, do I want to miss the next 5 years of my kid's life, or do I want to plead guilty in order to take 2 years? And so there's an argument, should they have pled or not? I don't want to get into all that. But what I see here is Frank Corva is doing a wonderful job of poking the bear, right? Because what he's doing is he's written this article saying, hey, dummy, Trump, you're getting egg on your face over here. The Southern District of New York is defying you. You should come over here and clean this up. And then, by the way, when you clean that up, you're going to get my boys Keown out of the claim.
Yeah.
So that's what I see the game being played here is. So I love it. Because I don't think Keown should be in jail or his partner in crime there. No, I guess I shouldn't even joke about using that expression, but his partner that was working on Samurai Wallet, those guys should not be in jail. They're the next Ross Ulbrichts that need to be freed. And if you haven't signed the petition and participated in that, please do, because they're unlawfully jailed from my vantage point. And I think Frank Corva's with this pointing this out in such a public way and seeing, the Trump White House actually, hey, we're watching this, is helping to ultimately get these guys out of jail.
Yeah, that's a great take. As we know, I'm pretty sure that Trump himself and his administration are not looking that favorably at SDNY and what's going on in New York right now. There's been a lot of kind of cultural conversation about what's happening in New York right now. And those judges down there, like you said, shouts out to Frank Corva. Maybe something comes of this for the better of all Bitcoiners, or rather, maybe actually more kind of surgical for the better of the Samurai Wallet devs themselves, and they do get a pardon, and that whole case does get exposed for what it was, which, as you said, or rather more alluded to, it was a very clearly a political case here. As when Keown did the rounds before he actually, turned himself in, he was very clearly, and I probably, at not the advice of his lawyers being like, look, they already had the results they wanted, and they just kind of backfilled the information to get what they wanted, which was the guilty pleas or the guilty conviction here. So, hey, maybe you're right. Maybe this is Frank playing 5D chess here of, hey, look, let's shine a light to this, and then maybe we can get, some Bitcoiners freed like we got Ross Ulbricht freed. So that I like that. That's a good take there. Very interesting. So yeah, shouts out to Frank. Love you, Frank. He's doing great work. He's doing Satoshi's work over there at Bitcoin Magazine. Anyways, let's do our last transition, and we're going to talk with Kent all things Bitcoin mining. So if you have some questions about Bitcoin mining, now's the time to drop them in the chat. If we get some good questions, we will answer them in 1 minute.
I want to give a shout out to our partner, HIVE Digital Technologies. Fueled by clean energy, HIVE has quadrupled its global Bitcoin mining footprint and channels that same scale into high performance compute, where their AI cloud is now ranked #1 in the world for network performance. At HIVE, you've got dual engines, Bitcoin and AI humming, roaring, accelerating in unison. They're lean and mean, they're green and clean, and they're rewriting the playbook on sustainable digital infrastructure. You can catch the latest buzz at HIVE Digital Tech or at hivedigitaltech.com. I want to give a shout out to our partner, bitcoinben.io. If you're into freedom, Bitcoin, and building a real community, this is for you. Gain exclusive access to real-world, members-only, private clubs across the globe, featuring poker nights, expert-led classes, co-working spaces, educational meetups, live events, and more. Current locations include Sarasota, Nashville, Boston, Dallas, Las Vegas, and St. Louis.
with new clubs launching soon in West Palm Beach, Scottsdale, Alabama, and beyond. Not to mention Bitcoin Bend's resorts in El Salvador. There's 3 of them, and they're absolutely beautiful. You'll also get access to the first fully backed Bitcoin bank with fiat ramps and savings accounts. It's called Private Key Bank. And you guessed it, it's based out of El Salvador. Go peer-to-peer with Bitcoin bulk buys. Tap into home equity for long-term Bitcoin growth. And join their exclusive mining pools if you're interested in mining. What are you waiting for? Head over to bitcoinbend.io. Join today, where Bitcoin meets freedom.
All righty then, guys. We are back. Kent, our boy Kent from Saz Mining, I forget what we like to call you, our in-house mining expert, updating us on what's going on the back end. But I do know, as you were telling me before the show, you want to hit on what you love to talk the most about Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining, and that's the idea of Bitcoin mining as savings. And you were telling me, you're like, I've been thinking about this a little differently. Hopefully this is a new way to spread the same message. So I will give you the floor. It's all you, Kent.
Yeah, no, I've been just thinking, I had a really cool client interaction this last month. Somebody that was unhappy after just like 18 months in his mining operation. And I broke it down the way that I see mining. And he's we're still kind of going back and forth, but I think it opened his eyes because, mining is an opportunity to energy cost average into a Bitcoin position over 3 years. And if you just take some simple math, like, hey, you have an electric bill every month. You generate sats every month, right? Like just day in, day out, as you secure the network, you earn sats for doing so, right? And you do that by participating with a mining pool. If you just divide those two numbers, you get $1 per Bitcoin price. I call that the energy cost average price that you're paying for your Bitcoin. Right now, in a couple of the offerings that we've got, one in Paraguay, one in Ethiopia, it's between 50,000 and 64,000, right? So pretty good savings to the Bitcoin that you'd buy on an exchange. So every bit of Bitcoin that you get, you've got to multiply that Bitcoin by the price delta that you saved by mining versus buying. And that delta, that difference, that savings is ultimately how you are justifying the investment in the mining rig, right? So that's the simple way that I think about it. Maybe I lost everybody here, but at the end of the day, you're using energy to get Bitcoin. And gosh darn, if it isn't just a radical thing that you can print your own Bitcoin out there, right? So you hate the Fed? Well, guess what? You can become the equivalent of the Fed by printing your own Bitcoin, right? And everybody can. You just need electricity at a low enough price and a piece of mining equipment and network connection. And we help out with all of that, right? And so our business model is we don't make anything, sell any hardware, electricity. Instead, we just say, hey, if we can produce your Bitcoin, then we get to take 15% of that. And that keeps our interests aligned. So we're non-custodial. We'll never hold your Bitcoin, any of that. But if you look at that argument of energy savings, then you're only talking about the price of Bitcoin. And this is the really radical thing, is if you think about what mining as a service is, it's honestly competition with exchanges, because everybody's been trained since 2012 when mining separated from running a node. Up until 2012, Bitcoiners that ran the Bitcoin code were largely miners too, because the code was together. Then ASICs and Coinbase opened their doors and the timeline split, and all of us have been trained to go buy your Bitcoin. But if you look at it, mining as a service is the top of the Bitcoin stack from an energy perspective, versus you go into an exchange, it's kind of like the bottom of the fiat stack, if you will, to where you can cross over into the Bitcoin ecosystem, but you're doing it at like the base of the fiat stack. So we're right here competing with the exchanges. And I would argue that it is a better exchange, better way to acquire sats through mining, because guess what? They're wild, meaning they're outside the banking surveillance system. They're at a discount. You've got the energy cost discount as opposed to dollar cost averaging on an exchange. And guess what? You don't have the point of purchase volatility that frankly freaks out a lot of people and keeps them away. If you're going to go onto an exchange and buy a grip of Bitcoin and that price drops 20%, you're going to freak out and feel stupid if you're a first time buyer. So I look at the market as everybody's going to end up as Bitcoiners someday, right? That's just my fundamental belief. And if you look at the stages to adoption, you start off as a no coiner. Then you go to a pre-coiner. It's like, hey, maybe there's something interesting going on here, and maybe I'm going to buy a little bit. And they're an early Bitcoiner, and then eventually you're a full-scale, like, bleeding maniac like you and I, Opti. You know, they're orange pilled to the max and screaming from the rooftops that we got to separate money and state. So, you know, when it's all said and done, you know, how you get those sats though has a fundamentally different impression for you. You will wind up with a different experience, and that different experience will be better for you if you're acquiring them by mining. That's my fundamental argument, because it's lower cost outside the banking system, and you can rest at night because you're just being streamed sats from your mining rig. So those are the reasons. That's the argument for why mining versus buying. But at the end of the day, I am in a heated battle with the exchanges. They have no idea who I am, but I'm in a heated battle with them to prove that mining is a better way to get your sats.
Interesting. Okay. Well, that is an updated view on the last time you were on this show talking about Bitcoin mining. I think one of the things that I've learned just all of last year is a lot of us that, you know, are trying to get more people into Bitcoin. You realize some of the narratives and kind of some of the memes you use and the ways that you make your arguments, they just always get met with, you know, dead eyes here. And so I just want to give you, you know, congratulations or applause on, like, you're thinking deeply on, like, how do I make this make sense to more people? Because I'm guessing you're getting more people. They're like, this is interesting to me, but like, why would I do this? And you're like, okay, I'm just tired. Like, I want people to know why I think this is the best way to get Bitcoin. And it's definitely updated.
Thank you, man. No, it's been true. And, you know, people are waking up to it. And, you know, you guys have been wonderful. And the audience here has been wonderful. You know, we've got a lot of clients that have come our direction from just seeing our advertising and my being on here, helping you guys out with the understanding of mining. Like, we doubled our customer base the last 2 years in a row, basically, which is pretty damn exciting. I mean, we're still relatively small, but, you know, you guys have probably heard the thing of, like, hey, do you want a big bag of rice, or do you want to double each grain on a chessboard? I'm totally blowing the metaphor, right? But exponentials have a way of really accelerating. So, you know, we keep doubling our customer base, and the message is going to spread. You know, we're small and growing, but people are finding it to be a better experience and keep coming back to the table. Like, a good majority of our clients wind up being repeat buyers, and are, you know, instead of stacking Bitcoin, like, this is one of the big things I think a lot of people miss, is the unit bias keeps a lot of people away from Bitcoin. Well, guess what? You don't need to buy one whole Bitcoin. You can go buy like one whole mining rig, own a money printer, and stream sats to yourself. And guess what? $5,000 for a mining rig is a whole lot easier to achieve than $100,000 for a full Bitcoin, right? So might as well shift the way you're thinking about it and go buy a Bitcoin printer.
Or $5,000 is the only way you can legally buy a money printer, you know. So you know, there's trade-offs here. There's trade-offs.
That's right. Go compete with the Fed, boys.
Yeah, become your own money printer. That should be the new motto. Anyways, Ken, I do want to ask you about kind of, you know, it's the start of 2026, and I think last time you came on, we did do kind of a state of mining in general. Like, what are your thoughts on just the Bitcoin mining ecosystem right now, where hash rate is, you know, like what would be your takeaway? Because we've noticed whenever we talk about Bitcoin mining on the show, like, people don't care. They just, like, don't tune in. But the ones that hang out, that are hardcore with us, you know, hang out to this segment, they are obviously very interested on what's going on from your vantage point. So as of now, it is January 6, 2026. What is the state of Bitcoin mining from not only an individual level, but also from a more institutional level? Like, where are we currently?
Oh, man. So Bitcoin, I always come back to Brandon Quittem and his pioneer species model for Bitcoin mining, because I think it's accurate. And he's an advisor for Saz Mining. If you've not read that, please do. It's a seminal piece as it relates to Bitcoin mining. But the idea is that Bitcoin mining shows up and monetizes the cheapest power it can find, which is oftentimes in high-risk situations. And then by doing so, civilization sort of grows up around it, and then more demand shows up for that electricity, and Bitcoin miners go on to find another very cheap source of power. I mean, this is why we're in Paraguay and Ethiopia. It's also why we're on the Arctic Circle in Norway, and some fringe dam in Wisconsin, right? because we're following that. And what you see is there is tremendous demand right now for power, cheap power, and power generally in the US. Like, I think the average price of electricity in the US is nearly 20 cents per kilowatt hour. So it's up like 30 or 40% in the last year or two. I mean, it's incredible, the pressure. And as a result, I think one of the more exciting things to watch this year is what the publicly traded mining, US publicly traded mining companies do, because a lot of them, they're having their nose turned, right? They've got a fiduciary responsibility to return dollars to their investors. And guess what? The AI companies are showing up at their doorstep, waving, fat sacks of Benjamins in front of their noses and saying, hey, why don't you guys sell us your power contracts and we can repurpose your infrastructure and do AI data centers. And so there's a lot of hash rate that should come offline if all that activity is followed through. So what I see is this weird dynamic that could play out. I'm not promising it, but could play out is maybe a 20-30% dip in hash rate while Bitcoin's price is also ripping, making everybody that's in mining just absolutely stoked that they gritted out like just a rough last year. Because last year was rough, right? Like the difficulty kept going up while Bitcoin's price was flat, right? And that means basically if you're mining, you're getting squeezed. The last month has been very interesting, right? We've basically been down on difficulty and or flat, right? Like the last 4 epochs. So this is every 2 weeks the difficulty adjusts, right? And that affects like how many sats you get per share of work that you deliver. And that actually has been creeping up and going the opposite direction, right? So you're getting more sats for your for the amount of work that you're delivering to the network. And so there's a weird dynamic at play here that I think, should it play out, will make everybody in mining look incredibly intelligent for having been here. Now, it could not go that way. We could see a bunch of crazy hash rate come online from nation state actors. But here's what I know at the end of the day. If you can get low-cost power and efficient mining rigs and you can get them plugged in, you're going to be pretty happy with the outcome in the long term. Just full stop. Nobody's upset that sits on their Bitcoin for a few years.
Yeah, 100%. I think one of the bigger, I guess, more impressive things that I did see last year with the hash rate was that it got to 1 zeta hash. I think Bitcoiners have been talking about that for a long time. There's been a lot of interest coming from nation states. We saw a lot of rumors about, whether the Middle East has been mining Bitcoin, whether Russia's been mining Bitcoin. We saw the hash rate go back into China, even though they're still kind of banning it right now. They're just, it really does show you that Bitcoin miners are like I don't even know, the guerrilla, unit out there, and they just go into all these different, very hostile environments to find cheap energy and acquire as much Bitcoin. So I'm also very bullish on just Bitcoin miners in general. I always joke that the Bitcoin miners never really get enough love. They're like the ugly redheaded stepchild of the industry. They're like the most important aspect of this, but like no one likes to talk about them. They're like, yeah, whatever, dude. Like, don't really care. But I know you don't like to make predictions, but could you make a prediction? You kind of hit on it on where do you think hash rate will end up 2026? Maybe do a bear case and a bull case.
Well, I think here's a middle of the road take, but I think we're going to say Zeta all year. I just like to say Zeta because how many industries do you get to say the word Zeta in? I mean, it's just a rap word to say. It just rolls off the tongue. Kidding aside, I think that what we're going to see is this is off the cuff here. I haven't really thought deeply about it. So to give you guys an idea, if you go back the last 5 years, give you a statistic, the average month-over-month hash rate increase has been more than 3%. Mining has made sense because Bitcoin's price has gone up faster than the hash rate. So you are you're saving to mine than buy, assuming you've got relatively low cost power. Now, what I think is going to happen this year with AI is going to lead to a weird dynamic where it is more likely to be less aggressively high, but I would be shocked if we aren't still in Zeta hash territory. So I think AI is going to take and move pubcos away. This is going to be great actually for the network, right? Because the incentives are not totally aligned with pubcos and the network versus, you know, all the hash rate heating that's looking to come online and people figuring out how to get bit access on their desktops and all these sort of things is going to allow that contingent to sort of pick up the slack. And, you know, folks like us, where we've got decentralized ownership in centralized locations across the planet, you know, helps to distribute the risk of anybody being able to like clamp down on a single data center someplace, right? So I think it's great for the network to see people that are dollar minded shift off, and we can move from, you know, the network has been largely dominated by fiat hashing. And what I mean by that is people that use Bitcoin mining as a proxy to get more dollars. That leads to not the same outcome as if you see Bitcoin as your money and you're here to get Bitcoin for your mining efforts. And getting more of the network dominated by Bitcoin hashers will get rid of a lot of the centralization issues that worry me and many of the others in the Bitcoin community. You know, things like centralization of mining pools, centralization of hardware production. You know, these are all choke points that could at some point be attack vectors for the Bitcoin ecosystem.
Love it. Absolutely love it. Good breakdown. I will point out that you didn't necessarily answer the question, but we'll take one Zeta for the whole year. Really, really good insight. So really good politics. You're playing a good political game there, Ken.
Oh man, I'm not giving it. I mean, if you want an argument, you sit down a bunch of Bitcoiners around the Thanksgiving table and you ask them what's price and what's hash rate going to be.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it's like politics and religion.
No, and then you also ask them the does price follow hash or does hash follow price? And you're never gonna not get an argument.
Never. No, so it's a fun one. So I don't know. I was totally wrong about what 2025 was going to be like. I feel like I've got a better lock on 2026 from a price perspective. From a hash rate perspective, it's harder because of this AI thing. It's like, how much is that going to impact the network? I just don't really know. If you use like some LLMs, like they guess like 20 to 40% of hash rate will be impacted. But then how much are institutions coming in, right? Yeah. Like the sovereign nation states are like, oh gosh, like we need energy money, we need Bitcoin. And how much do they ramp up? I don't know. It's kind of a crapshoot, hard to say.
Yeah, 100%. And actually, you kind of reminded me of there has been, and we'll wrap up after this, and we'll plug Saz right before we roll out today's show, but an interesting kind of like trend and narrative that I've seen in the last few weeks was this idea, you know, for a long time in Bitcoin, there was always this like meme, you know, Bitcoin miners are going to boil the ocean. They're going to take over all the world's energy. And then once kind of AI became a thing and people started talking about, oh, AI is going to, you know, what's Elon Musk saying? Like AI is going to make sure we're not going to work and we're all going to be super rich and it's going to improve our lives, guys. It's interesting to see the narrative shift around energy. One example, and I didn't fact check this, but my buddy was telling me that even like Bill Gates has completely shifted on a dime, where before he was out here like, oh, we're going to block out the sun because it's bad for us and too much energy use. And now they're like, wait, we're super bullish on AI. We need more energy now. And I'm like, all right, look, whatever it took to get here, I'm kind of okay with it. Obviously, I'm not the biggest fan of what Bill Gates has done per se, but I've always been like, we need more energy. More energy is good. I am not one of these people that wants to take us back to the Stone Ages and have less energy. But it is interesting how this shift of narrative has happened so quickly because of AI. And now everyone, like the ESG standards are like completely out the window. They're just like, yeah, we need AI. We need more energy. And it's like, all right, cool. Like, remember you guys have fought Bitcoin miners for, 17 years on energy usage. And now since AI is going to do all these wonderful utopian things, they're like, we need more energy. So have you caught all that? I'm sure you caught that.
Oh yeah. It's wonderful to just watch like, you fight a fight for so long and then watch somebody else walk in the room and they just turn on the light switch and like, oh, it's all over. We're done. Pack it up, boys. We don't have to fight anymore. It's crazy. It's so crazy making. But you know, it's the way the game is played right now. We still live in fiat land. You know, we may be Bitcoiners, but we're living in a fiat reality. And you know, I think it's going to take a lot more hard work from all of us to get the reality to push past that point of no return and get into a Bitcoin standard. So we'll get there. It's a fun fight to be up against, because I mean, at the end of the day, here's my core pet peeve, right? Inflation. Just straight up. If you look at what inflation actually is, it's the theft of people's life force. What do I mean by that is people work, they put in their time, their energy, and their intentionality to create value for other people, and that value gets stolen from them via inflation, right? So if you're going to put your life force towards anything, to me, it's to go after slaying the biggest dragon on the planet, right? Which is inflation, and giving people back their life force and their time so that they can they can have it to do more creative pursuits. And I think humanity's a lot better by getting that done. So yeah, does it suck to have AI walk into the room and flip the tables on something that you work so damn hard? Yeah, absolutely. But at the same time, am I going to change my direction to go fight an AI fight? Hell no. That's boring to me compared to separate money and state.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I'm really not the biggest AI guy. I kind of think it's a little more overhyped than anything else. But if this is the benefit of AI, you know, energy abundance is like Bitcoin mining, kind of just like the arguments against it go away, I'll take that. I'll take that as a W, you know, though I think it might play out the opposite. I think you'll see the, you know, the FUD around energy use go down and the pro AI energy use go up. And then they're going to be like, but these Bitcoin miners are taking all the energy that AI needs. And now they'll find just a new reason to, you know, FUD Bitcoin. So I wouldn't be surprised if that's the case. Anyways, and enough of me not liking AI that much. I do use AI a little bit, guys. All right. So, you know, I chat with the demon just like anyone else. All right. Anyways, Kent, let's do one final plug of Saz Mining before we run out. I do have here the website. So let's just do, you know, 2-minute elevator pitch on Saz Mining. If you guys liked what Kent did on the show today, get in touch with him.
Yeah, so for sure. DMs are open at K Halliburton, first letter, last name on Twitter, best way to reach me. So there you go. Mine a Bitcoin today for 50,958 cup bucks. And you get those, that's the energy cost averaging that I was talking about earlier. So you go on our website, you choose a mining rig, we get it plugged in for you. They're your Bitcoin. We don't make any money until you're receiving Bitcoin. And we take 15%. So yes, you've got to pay for the mining rig. Yes, you have to pay for the electricity, but those are cost pass through. We don't make money on those. Our newest offering is an S21 Plus, about $3,000 before import and setup fees, $150 to run that, 245,000 sats per month. That is net. So that's after our management fee. So that is the value proposition directly. We'll get that up and going for you in 3 to 6 weeks. Sort of depends on the frequency of the shipment from China. They go by air roughly once per week from China, and depending on customs, can be as short as 3 weeks before it gets plugged in. So we've increased our customer base just because I happen to see it in the chat coming through right now. We've got nearly 500 customers at this point in time, and we continue to double. I'll be shocked if we don't end the year with over 1,000. And most of our customers are repeat buyers because they like what we're doing. We're small, but you know, we punch above our weight class and we do the right thing over and over again. Our values, which is something we settled on just this last year after working hard at this, is like, okay, what do we stand for as Bitcoiners? Because all of us, and you're all 13 of us, are all Bitcoiners, and we decided we're fueled by passion. I mean, I think you guys hear I'm passionate about doing what I'm doing. but all of us and our Bitcoiners are passionate about what we're building and doing. We win the right way. So that just means we come at this with integrity. We get into situations where, we make mistakes. We're human beings, but we approach it, all those mistakes, and try to solve it to the best of the benefit for customers that we possibly can. And then lastly, we proof of work. We're meritocratic here. I don't care where the great ideas come from in our organization. We just want to win. So anyway, we got a different approach. Nobody else has pursued it with the angle that we have, taking software and applying it to software as a service applied to data centers. But so far, customers have been pretty satisfied.
Love it, Ken. Actually, one last question. I did kind of bring this up, but someone asked it on Rumble. Shouts out the C-suite, and he goes, "Are those costs all write-offs in 2026, Kent?" So maybe one last.
One last plug. So the bonus depreciation, yes, for our U.S.-based customers that get deployed in the U.S. and we have data centers in the works that are not delivered to the market yet. But if you deploy your hardware, if you're a U.S. citizen and you are deploying hardware in the U.S. in this service year, you will get bonus depreciation, meaning that you can write off the value of your equipment. Most of our U.S.-based customers throw their hardware and electricity into an LLC so that they can take write-offs on all of that. So that improves the value proposition, but anything you see displayed on our website does not include that because we have a global base, actually. So about 60% of our clients are U.S.-based and about 40% are outside the U.S. And we get a lot of customers, actually, that love the wild sats angle, meaning they may have capital controls where they are and they want to get their hands on Bitcoin and struggle to, so they can do it by mining. And we have a lot of clients that are US based because we're a US based company. So it's really interesting to see where people are finding us from, but it's literally all over the planet.
Absolutely great question, C-Suite. All right, Kent, thank you so much for filling in today, or rather just being on the show. Hang out for a minute. Let me wrap up the show, and I'll be there in 1 second. So, Kent, thank you so much. Actually, plug your Twitter again. I forget what your Twitter is. K Halliburton.
K Halliburton, just like my last name. So yeah, thanks so much for having me on here, Opti. I always have a blast chatting with you and talking to your fans.
You as well, man. Appreciate it. All right, guys, there you have it. The January 6th, 2020. I just clicked Jan 6, 2026 show. All right. So like I said in the beginning of the show, Nico is most likely going to be out, which I'm sure very few of you guys are mad about. I know he's been kind of bearish on you guys. So it's going to be me holding it down because Sophie is about to have their second child. So he's kind of on call right now. So I'm holding it down for you guys this week. I did talk to Luke this morning. I'm going to try to schedule with him. We'll get an Opti Luke extremely bullish hopium episode at some point this week. We have to kind of coordinate our schedules, but this week will be a little different. But we'll be back to the same stuff we always do next week. On that note, guys, we appreciate you, and I will see you on tomorrow's episode. Peace out.
Today's episode was brought to you by BitcoinWell.com, a Bitcoin-only platform on a mission to enable financial independence.